Hello and welcome to Cinemaholics, where we review the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. One of us is a film critic, one is a casual moviegoer, and the third person is me, your host John Negroni from the Internet, California. On the show today, we have from the Internet, Pennsylvania, he is a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend and a freelance film critic for the playlist Cutprint Film. Hey you guys, the young folks, and plenty more where that came from. It's Will Ashton.
Hello.
Sadly, our casual moviegoer wasn't able to catch Mid90s. It's been a tumultuous 2 weeks. I've been on vacation, just got back, and
Nice.
Maverick Hines just celebrated his birthday.
Oh, nice. I gotta wish him happy birthday.
We surprised him with a party when he was supposed to see Mid90s. So,
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was not my doing directly, but I did know that he was not going to be able to catch the movie. So he still wants to see Mid90s and hopefully talk about it on a future episode.
Okay, cool. I'll be curious to hear his thoughts. I was actually really looking forward to hearing what he had to say about the film, because I kind of know how you feel about it, but I wasn't sure how he'd feel about it.
Yeah,
So.
and we don't have that much else to talk about this week. We're going to devote a lot of time to Mid90s, and we're also going to be talking about The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, a new show on Netflix. We're going to be talking about Johnny English Strikes Again, for some reason. I'm going to be talking about Red Dead Redemption 2 later in the show, and Will has a special surprise, a show that he's been meaning to talk about that came out pretty recently, so we'll save that as a surprise. For now, though, let's get into... We just have one off topic for this week, and that's just catching up on our patron poll, because again, I've been on vacation, so we haven't had time to do any extra episodes. We haven't really been pushing any other content lately, so we did our patron poll though this past week. We asked for your help in deciding what to review, and it was between Mid90s was one of the options, obviously The Haunting of Hill House, which we are going to talk about next week. Maverick Hines has already seen the whole season, but isn't on the show this week, so we're going to wait on that. And then there was Suspiria. Now, Suspiria, for a while, we thought it was going to win the whole thing, which was making us very nervous because it didn't hit the Bay Area as planned. So Maverick and I were completely unable to... There's no way we could have seen Suspiria in time. We probably would have had to driven to Los Angeles. That said, it ended up being a three-way tie. For those of you who don't know, we do a poll every week to help decide which movies we're going to review, and maybe even in like which order. And we didn't want to review Hunter Killer, the new Gerard Butler film, and something about doing a whole episode about Johnny English Strikes Again. I don't know, Will. It seemed to fill you with dread.
It would be like the shortest episode of Cinemaholics ever.
Basically. So you guys helped us decide between two indie films. I don't know if... Not even just indie films, but limited release films, as well as a new Netflix miniseries. And it was a three-way tie. So we ended up going with Mid90s just because it was actually available in the Bay Area. And you were able to see it a little while back. Will, how long ago did you see Mid90s?
Well, I only saw Mid90s on Thursday, but
okay.
I saw Suspiria the week before. So I should mention, I have seen Suspiria. I'm very excited to talk about it, but I will hold my tongue until you gentlemen get to see the film as well, because I'm very excited to talk about that one.
Stick around toward the end of this episode to find out which movie we're going to be talking about next week, or which ones we're going to be deciding. And we were actually talking about this because we do really want to talk about Suspiria, but next week, we'll get to it, but there's some high-profile releases. So we're thinking of maybe doing a last call for Suspiria at some point, kind of like what we did with Bad Times at the El Royale. We also have a last call for Hateful Eight coming up, so a lot of bonus episodes coming up. Hope you're all excited, as excited as we are.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. Definitely.
For sure. Okay, so with that said, let's just dive into our featured review. We're talking about Mid90s, which it just expanded this past week, as we mentioned. It started hitting limited release in October 19th. It premiered at the Toronto Film Festival. It also played at Fantastic Fests to initially really good reviews, and then they've kind of evened out. It's now, I think, in the 60%-ish area on Rotten Tomatoes. It was written and directed by Jonah Hill, of course, better known as an actor. He's been acting for almost 2 decades now, and this is his first film that he's directed. He's also co-wrote a few screenplays, however. I forget which ones they actually are, but, this is obviously something Jonah Hill has always wanted to do, write and direct his own film, and it might be, maybe get 1 or 2 Oscar nods, I'm not sure, but...
I think so.
Maybe some Golden Globe nominations. It's possible. I'm not saying it's likely, but we'll see.
I mean, if the Florida Project didn't get that many Oscar noms, I don't know if Mid90s is going to get the attention that it may or may not deserve.
It would almost be like a testament to the prestige behind A24 more than anything else. And also, Florida Project and Lady Bird kind of came out at the same time. And, we were talking about before we started doing the show, some of the connections between Lady Bird and Mid90s. And I sort of, I've seen that comparison made. And, Will, you had a perspective on this that I thought was interesting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're both films from fairly prominent, I guess, I don't know if Greta Gerwig is technically a comedic actress, but
sure,
I mean, just fairly prominent character actors who have been working with a lot of filmmakers, a lot of distinguished filmmakers, and just kind of come into their own. But they both showed signs of kind of being fairly astute about film, and just like you said, they both were writers. They kind of worked their way up through producing and stuff like that. So they did it the smart way. They kind of went up the chain and then eventually made their first films through A24, which are very personal coming of age stories that both deal with mother relationships in some way or another,
and
one more so than the other. But
both are set in a different time period as well.
Yeah, in California.
Yeah. Although so Lady Bird was Sacramento, this was Los Angeles, although I thought it was Detroit for a little bit there. Yeah, I did. Just there were some ways that I don't know. Some of the ways some scenes were shot, I initially thought Los Angeles, but then I was like, is this Detroit? And then that kind of faded from theorizing. But
yeah, I mean, it's not like the showier parts of California or I guess Los Angeles, because kind of similar to how the Florida Project was shot away from Disney World. This was kind of shot away from the bigger parts of Los Angeles to kind of show a certain perspective of it. Probably one that is personal to Jonah Hill. I mean, but I don't want to assume. But.
Yeah, he was born and raised in Los Angeles, Jonah Hill. And he was also really involved in the hip hop scene. He had an older brother who was kind of Slim Shady-esque, I think his older brother too, I think he passed away. Now
really?
I think about it. I don't remember if that's true or not, but if not that, something tragic happened. But yeah, and I'd say, as Lady Bird would say, he kind of grew up on the other side of the tracks, right? Also, Lucas Hedges is in both films, so yeah, there are connections to be made.
Yeah,
he plays the older brother here.
Didn't even think about.
Yeah, Lucas Hedges having quite a year. So anyway, Mid90s, as we've mentioned, it's about a 13-year-old kid named Stevie who lives in Los Angeles, and it's probably about 1996, the summer of 96, summer of 97, one of those years. I don't think
really. I thought it was 95.
I don't know if it is, because I think I remember watching the movie and someone either says something or there's some sort of hint that 1995 already happened. So I don't know. I might be wrong about that.
I know there's a scene with Lucas Hedges' character where he has a shirt that says 94, so I figured it was after that, but I didn't remember if it was 96 or not. I mean, you might be right. I mean, it's obviously in the mid period, so it's somewhere between 94 and 96, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say 94. I think that would be a little bit too early, but well, it could be 95, and I might have just misheard something. But yeah,
I don't know. Yeah,
the movie, it's about a group of friends that Stevie befriends, this group of skater kids, and starts to get into some trouble, and that sort of mirrors, the trouble he has at home and growing up and everything like that. The film stars Sunny Suljic from The Killing of a Sacred Deer. He was the bad kid from House with a Clock in Its Walls, which is funny because I remember we were even talking about how he was kind of such a kind of a better actor than the main kid in that movie, which might be a little mean to say, but he really was.
Well, I don't know if I'd even go that far. I'd just say I think he just had more charisma. When you watch him, he was just inherently more of an interesting actor than our lead in that film. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a testament to him and his upcoming talent.
I think so too. Yeah,
he kind of stole the film from the main star of that one.
Yeah, he's got a bright future ahead of him, and it's funny to mention too. With Jonah Hill, he was also an executive producer on Maniac, which we talked about recently, and that also is kind of a. You can kind of see the personal story that Jonah Hill is trying to put in his character actor studies and everything like that. But regardless, this film also stars, like we mentioned, Lucas Hedges. It also stars Katherine Waterston, who plays Stevie's mom, which I was not expecting to see her in this movie.
Well, I knew that at one point, I think very early on, Michelle Williams was attached. And when Katherine Waterston came, I was like, oh, okay, I guess she replaced Michelle Williams because obviously I think we would have heard about it if Michelle Williams was involved with this film. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure why she dropped out. I think it might have been a scheduling thing with all the money in the world, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. She obviously plays a very young mom here. She talks about how she had her oldest kid when she was about 18. So definitely like a single mom kind of a life that that obviously creates some of the drama in this movie. And there are some newcomers to this film, along with some familiar faces. There's Jared Carmichael, Alexa Damie, and Jax Malcolm, who play some of the skater kids. Mid90s, interesting film. Let's start talking about it, I guess. Will Ashton, what was your take on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think between the two of us, I was a little more excited for this one, or at least I had a little more anticipation, just because I like Jonah Hill as an actor. I think, as we said earlier, I think he is a student of film. He tends to be pretty smart and thoughtful about how he approaches film, not only as an actor, but just as a person who enjoys film and someone who, obviously I think he goes into this business because he wants to tell stories. And I think that was a natural extension at this point to be a director, write a director. And I was looking it up. I don't believe he has actually made anything that's like been like a published screenplay per se, but he has been involved with the stories for the 22 and 21 Jump Street films.
Yeah, he co-wrote. So like he helped out with it. Yeah, but he's given a co-writing credit, but he obviously, he hasn't written his own screenplay on his own.
As well as Sausage Party and Why Him, and the short-lived Fox series Alan Gregory, if you remember that.
Oh, shoot.
Which he was the lead actor in that as well.
That was a weird one.
But yeah, I remember, I think it was a Sarah Bareilles music video that he like directed like a while ago, where it was like all one take, and I was like, oh yeah, this guy. So he can direct. Yeah. Like he can direct. Like I was waiting, like, can he really prove his chops with a film? And I think he does for the most part. I think this film, above all else, is a good testament to him being a proven director and showing that he can have a certain vision. I think the way the movie is able to portray its time period is fairly distinctive and spot on in several moments. I think the way he works with actors, especially unproven or early actors, I guess, people who I believe he just like found a couple skaters and then he just kind of got some really good performances out of them. I think that's a testament to him as a director, just kind of finding these naturally talented people and kind of giving that authenticity that he's looking for in the film. And I think that's what really stood out to me throughout this film, is just the way it kind of breathes and lets things just feel natural and ingrained to this time period. However, I just kind of wish there was a little more meat on its bones. Like, I do think he has something to say. I don't think he's necessarily subtle about how he says it, but I think he does have some messages or some points he wants to say, but I don't think the story itself is really anything we haven't seen before. It's a fairly rote story that doesn't... I mean, it's given a little bit more of a personal, heartfelt edge from his directing side, but I think as a screenwriter, I just kind of wish he beefed up a little bit more. And I think you were alluding to this earlier. I believe if they had maybe made the mother-son angle a little more heartfelt or a little more focused on, or maybe even with his brother, any of these type of stories that are kind of left promised on, or something that can be developed but not really extended. And I get that he's ultimately focusing more on the group of friends that he gets himself involved in, the skater community that he participates in, and I guess it's fine. I mean, I do think that works ultimately, but I just kind of wish the movie had a little bit more going on, I guess. But as it stands, I do think it's a very good directorial debut for him. I think it's very promising as far as directing first films go, but I think there's a better film lurking inside here, and I wish that had come out.
Yeah, there's not a lot of catharsis, probably, between those relationships. I sort of took it as he's sort of moved on from looking up to his older brother and caring what his mom thinks. And I think that actually landed for me. And I should say, I was not looking forward to this, as you kind of mentioned. I was kind of expecting to not like this. I remember the trailers. I was just like, this just feels like such a dude-centric kind of, like, I just thought it was going to be a slog to sit through with, all of the homophobic slurs and all of just the, like, I took it as like, is this just going to be like some glorification of how annoying and nasty teenagers in the 90s were? I wasn't really looking forward to that.
Or teenagers in general. I mean,
sure.
I think that's one thing about the film, is that, like, it's kind of showing that, like, how this, like, kind of our masculinity, or how we perceive masculinity, kind of grows from multiple generations. There's like a ripple effect that they kind of explore.
Yeah.
and how in some ways it's very dated and very much not what it is today, but at the same time it is very similar to how teenagers or men are today. And I found that was one of the themes of the film that was very compelling.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was. I don't know if I agree if that was a theme. I think that I don't think Jonah Hill is trying to say this is good, this is bad. I don't think he's trying to glorify anything with this screenplay. I just got the sense that he's doing a sort of slice of life. Here's the life. Here are the lives of some of these kids, what they're going through. A couple of meaningful things happen, but the more meaningful thing is this sort of evolution of like, this idea that when you're at this age, you sort of have to make a decision on who you're going to be for the rest of your life. And for a lot of people, that is the age where that happens. And that kind of spoke to me a lot because you see it's such a drastic thing in the summer before you go into, it probably would have been like 8th grade for this kid or maybe even high school, depending. You see the changes that he's going through and how quick they are. When he comes back to school, he's going to be a completely different person. And that to me spoke to this film's authenticity. And I ended up kind of liking this a lot. I have to say, watching this one, you kind of touched on it, but the idea that Jonah Hill's directing can be evaluated in a lot of different things, like, the setting, and how he brings the 90s about. I was thoroughly impressed with what he did here because there is not a detail I caught that ages out this movie. He really just, there's like an obsession with Jonah Hill maybe with how he was able to, like, every little thing from like trash on the ground was always 90s specific. They had a beeper store, like everything that you're seeing was, I thought, really thoughtfully considered. To me, like, that was so necessary because I would have had a hard time buying, the time period of this if it hadn't had those things. And even though it's not a movie where a ton of things happen, it reminds me a little bit of Jim Jarmusch's Patterson almost, where which way less happens in that movie than this one.
Yeah, or
sure.
Just Jim Jarmusch films in general.
Sure.
They have this look and feel to them.
Sure, it definitely is a movie that's sort of shying away from like meaty story. At one point, I was like, "Is this just like half of a movie?" And more about just sort of it's like introductions, and I felt like I was watching one long music video. Honestly, it's not a fantastic film, I don't think, but I love the music in this. I adore it.
Yeah, it's great.
I think that the hip hop and he goes from hip hop to pop at like a moment's notice, and like you really get the idea that like the way that Edgar Wright sort of put his own music taste in Baby Driver, and that kind of came through. The same thing is happening with Jonah Hill. These are obviously songs that, for him to have gotten the rights to these songs, first of all, you can sort of tell like his connection to LA and the hip hop community is totally there. Which is very impressive. And, it speaks a lot to what we were talking about, like this being a very personal project for him. And it kind of makes the film the complete opposite of boring, because even in scenes where these kids are just skating, that's all that's happening, which, again, really, really great work to show these kids like skating moderately well and doing these really impressive takes involving this. What makes the movie kind of be entertaining and kind of a thrill to watch is the way the music is weaved in. Like, it is like one long music video. And I think there are just enough details here, like with the way that there's a moment between Stevie and his mom that is just kind of a gut punch. I wanted to hear from you, Will. How did that's like the big moment, probably big dramatic moment of this movie. How did it play for you?
Are you talking about the scene in the car?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that was certainly not a fun scene to watch, but I mean, the acting in it is, I mean, it really, I think this is what we're kind of talking about here, is that this not only feels like a time capsule, it is kind of like a slice of life thing where you're just kind of watching in on this very family dynamic, or this very ingrained kind of family dynamic. And I mean, I would say even more than that scene, there's a scene in the kitchen that was pretty hard to watch.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I think that one might have hit me a little harder than the scene you're talking about, but they're both pretty brutal. And certainly unflinching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I should probably mention, I wasn't 13 in the mid-90s. I was more of a little kid. And so I don't have like that direct kind of feel, or I don't have that direct kind of connection to this movie. I probably connect more personally to like Boyhood, which more about growing up in the early 2000s as a teenager. But I still was able, I thought the way that the film handles like universal themes of fitting into a new group of friends and kind of having to like prove yourself, sometimes by like hurting yourself almost. There's a running thread of this film where like Stevie clearly has some issues with like pain, like trying to hurt himself in private, that I thought was very, I don't know if poignant is the right word, but it's certainly something you don't see a lot in films of this nature.
I think it's more so, I mean, at least as far as I took it, it's more like he feels like he has to earn his lumps, I guess. Like he kind of has to feel like in order to be like accepted into the group or to be like a man, essentially, he has to like hurt or get hurt or hurt himself in some way. And I think that's certainly a theme of the film.
Well, he was doing that though before he even met those kids, right?
No, that's what I mean. Like with his brother, I mean, the first shot of the film is him like getting pummeled by his brother, and like you're saying, there's like a couple of things where he even hurts himself, like self-inflicted, where it's just like this kind of, I mean, it's an observation of the film, I guess, that like, I don't know if it's something Jonah Hill was trying to say or just something that he ultimately said, whether he knew it or not, but there is this kind of theme where he gets hurt constantly. And I mean, it's never really fun to watch, I guess, a 13-year-old kid get hurt constantly, but it is something that is explored in the film, this kind of idea of like pain and masculinity and how they kind of interweave, or we feel like they have to interweave. And that's, I mean, it's kind of disturbing when you really break it down. I mean, certainly with the abuse of his brother is, yeah. Although I don't know how I quite feel about like the character development of abuse with his brother. It kind of reminded me of in Fantastic Four, the new film, where his brother, or he got the signature catchphrase, "It's clobbering time," from his brother beating him. Oh my
gosh, yeah.
So I don't know how I exactly feel about that per se.
I think one of the films, I think it's easy to walk away from Mid90s sort of annoyed with it, maybe, kind of thinking that it's teaching a lesson that isn't probably a lesson that's good for society, maybe, in the terms of like, this is how you prove you're a man, maybe, like to what you're saying. But I think that there is a dynamic between there's like this cool skater kid, Ray, who really takes Stevie under his wing, and you see sort of like much more of a mentoring there. It reminds me a lot of Moonlight, actually, the way that Mahershala Ali takes in Chiron when he's a little kid.
A24 film.
That's right. And that sort of like mentoring relationship, it's obviously a very different dynamic, but what you see with like the way that he has like this really long stretch of dialogue with Stevie at one point that is deeply profound. And I was very impressed with how the film sort of like reverses some of these ideas of like, Stevie initially he's like the sweet little kid at first. And, one of the younger kids of the group who starts to hate Stevie eventually, Ruben, tells him that, don't say thank you. Don't do it. You got to be like a jerk. You got to do all this stuff. And like, it's very reminiscent of, and we're two guys, reminiscent of what?
I said, there's a couple of dudes.
We're just a couple of dudes over here on a podcast. But I don't know about the way you were raised, Will Ashton, but toxic masculinity, that was kind of what we're raised on, in our in our social groups. And
that's what I'm kind of hinting at earlier, but yeah, go on.
Exactly. No, but it's very true to like the way that we were raised and the way that society has been generation after generation. And there's a moment where Ray sort of like inverses or reverses all of those lessons that I thought was kind of profound and kind of what I think a lot of kids maybe watching, not kids maybe, but maybe like 20-somethings, college students, people who are kind of figuring their life out should probably watch, because you're so impressionable at that age, and so many things like stick and glue to you. And there was something about Mid90s that kind of made me a little bit more hopeful for, even if you choose the path of like the troublemaking skater friends, they're not like these super evil people, but they're also not good. It's not a moralist movie. It's not telling you this is right, this is wrong. It's just sort of saying, some people are going to go down this road of being a bit of a troublemaker, and it can turn out, you can turn out like Ray maybe, who, seems to have a pretty bright future ahead of him. You can turn out like FS. I don't want to say his actual nickname. The Sheryl Crow looking MFer. But definitely two very distinctive characters who are best friends, but are extremely different, and they represent two completely different paths. For Stevie, I don't know. I could ramble on and on, but hopefully what I'm saying makes sense.
Yeah, no, I really agree with you, and I wasn't really sure how I felt at first. Well, I guess I kind of knew how I felt when I was watching the scene you're talking about, because when it started, I was like, oh, this is going to be like an after-school special kind of thing, like, just two guys talking, and like just like the way it was starting to get set up, I was
G.I. Joe was going to show up, and then...
Yeah, it's just like, or the Hulk Hogan or something like, hey, brothers, let me tell you about toxic masculinity.
That's a way better 90s reference.
Yeah, no, I think as that scene went on, I think that's a testament to Jonah Hill's writing. And I mean, I've been fairly critical of it as far as the structure of the film, but I think there are select moments where he does shine as a writer, and I think that is one of them where it did. I mean, that scene ultimately did win me over. I think also from that performance, I forget the actor's name. I believe this is his first time acting. If not, I apologize for speaking out of turn. But I think that scene really won me over, and I think that was one of the scenes where, yeah, you certainly see what the film is going for, and you kind of piece together what at first seemed a little meandering, a little incomplete, and I think you kind of get the idea of, okay, this is what you're going for, Jonah Hill.
Yeah.
It's not really like a deep message. I don't think it's something that hasn't been said before, but I do think, like you're saying, it's something that I think will resonate with people, and while I don't think this film is necessarily going to be as universal as Lady Bird or Eighth Grade earlier this year, I do think this film is going to speak to a lot of people, probably male, but that's not to say that women won't get anything out of this. But I do think there is, like you're saying, there's something about our relationship to toxic masculinity and just our relationship to male dynamics and how we kind of perceive these things that is pretty fascinating, I think, as far as Jonah Hill explores it.
Yeah, and to answer your question from before, or kind of observation, all the skater kids, aside from Stevie, are first time actors. Nikel Smith, Nikel Smith plays Ray, and as far as I'm aware, he's never been in anything else, and it really is just a testament to Jonah Hill. And I think Allison Jones did the casting here, and she's definitely well known for. I think she also casted Fourth Grade, if I'm not mistaken, or sorry, Eighth Grade, or not Eighth Grade, Florida Project. That's right. There's a character. There is a character in here named Fourth Grade who very much reminded me. I was like, that's probably who Jonah Hill was as a kid. That's probably his avatar.
I think he's a little bit of everyone, but it seemed like Stevie was the main one that he was basing himself off of.
I don't know.
It's hard to. I mean, but I do think there is. I don't know. Like I said, I think there is a little bit of Jonah Hill, and
we should ask him. See what he thinks.
Yeah, just bring him on. Yeah.
I do want to point out here the music. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did the score, and it's fantastic. I really think that this film almost is kind of saved by its music, and they're a big reason why. And I can't remember the last time Trent Reznor did a film. Actually, feels like it's been a couple years.
He's been doing quite a few. I mean, I was listening to Jonah Hill on Howard Stern. He was talking about the process of getting them. I guess they did the score like while they were on tour, and I guess they did it for basically free because I guess they didn't really have as much money. It all went to the soundtrack budget. But I guess what he was saying was that he wanted to be basically the inverse of the Social Network score, which is kind of cold and cynical, and he wanted like the same style from those two musicians, but something a little warmer and something that would give a lot of life to the film. And it's interesting. It's like the inverse of what they did before, but at the same time, it is totally there. It's definitely an Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor score, and I was really impressed by it as well.
Yeah, same here. Let's get into our final thoughts then and grade this thing. I think I'm pretty high up on this one, higher than I thought I would be. I'm like a low B plus. I think that for me, even though I agree with a lot of what you're saying in terms of like, at times it feels like half a movie. At times it feels like there are some avenues they could have explored that make this a more universal film. I think that's what really holds it back from being terrific. But it has all the ingredients of like an A film, an A24 film maybe, in the sense that it's so technically well done, and it. The way it's directed, it's substantive, but it's also flashy. It's stylish. I can remember like certain scenes that are just kind of glorious in the way that they're structured. Some of the one takes, and they don't feel like just there to be there. They actually inform sort of the psyche of this young kid. And I think watching him change over the course of a summer, it was different than Florida Project. It's doing something different from that, but both films, I think they share the same DNA, and those are kind of my type of films, honestly. So, it's not quite an A film for me, and I don't heartily put it in the B plus territory, if only because, it's short. It's an hour 24. Again, the A24 references just keep coming, but I think this one, a lot of people are going to get something out of it, and I'd like to hear from more female critics on what they think of it, because obviously it's an experience that, it's kind of like when you and I watched Lady Bird, right? We we didn't have those like very clear connections, but we were still able to relate, and we were still able to get a lot out of that film. I wonder if the same can be said in Mid90s. So low B plus for me.
Interesting. Yeah. So we were talking earlier about, I guess, who would probably be the influences of this film. We brought up Richard Linklater, who seems pretty apparent. There seems to be a little bit of Cameron Crowe in here as well. But throughout the film, I kept thinking about Larry Clark and Harmony Korine. Harmony Korine actually, I think, makes a cameo in the film around the midpoint. But it's definitely, I think I said this earlier, but it feels like a spiritual successor to Kids, their film from, like, I think 1995.
Yeah.
And just like the way that they explored like youth in that period of time, it's definitely even though this film has a lot of hard edges to it, it's definitely softer in comparison to that film. But in some ways, it feels like a continuation of those themes and those ideas and messages explored in that film. And that film's also kind of meandering a little bit and kind of went off, and it wasn't really clear until the end what the filmmakers were saying. But I do like the film ultimately. Like we were saying, I think as a showcase for Jonah Hill, the director, I think it's very strong, and I do think he is going to really bloom as a filmmaker if he wishes to pursue that avenue. And I think the performances are terrific. I do think there's a lot to love from the cinematography. It was shot on 65 millimeter, and it's kind of boxed in too, which kind of adds to the time capsule feel of it. Like that one character I think we were talking about earlier. I forget his name though, but how he's like always like filming everything. It just kind of feels like that, like you're just watching it from his camera almost.
Fourth grade. Breakout character of 2018.
Yeah. I do think there's a lot to like. I just kind of wish I had a richer experience with it ultimately, but I do like what I saw, and I'm between a B and a B minus. I think I'm gonna give it. I'll give it a low B, just because I do think what works here really works, and I do think that people are gonna get a lot out of it. I just kind of wish it had lived up to my expectations a little more, but ultimately I do recommend it.
It sounds like too, like neither of us had a big issue with the nostalgia in this film being used. Yeah. To me, like I was kind of dreading, I forgot to mention, like I was dreading sort of, is this going to feel like the 80s, very similar, just using the time period to bait us a little bit. And I'm happy to say it's hard to evaluate these things, and it might come off that way for some, but not for me in the slightest. I thought that it was all in service to plot and theme. So it wasn't, it definitely didn't feel like Jonah Hill was trying to just make you remember things and that was the joke. It was always just setting, which is, I think, right. I think that's how you do it.
Yeah, I think that's the best testament to his filmmaking prowess, is that this film really does feel like of its time and place. And it doesn't feel like a gimmick. I think it just ultimately is what he wanted to explore, what he felt was the most meaningful part of his life, perhaps, and just exploring that in a film. I thought he did a really terrific job with that.
And I'm always a sucker for films where, there's an older brother involved. I had some grim flashbacks to when I was 13, sneaking into my brother's room. My brother is 9 years older than me, so going into my brother's room as a kid and like sneaking around his stuff and making sure that like he couldn't tell that I was in there. That was just, it was like walking into a memory, including all the hip hop and all that stuff. So anyway, so we're pretty positive on the film, B plus territory. Rotten Tomatoes, I misspoke before. It actually has gone up to 78% as of this weekend. I think it was in the 60s before it hit a wider release. But 78%, not bad, and most people are digging this one. And I think a lot of you listening might like it as well. It should be hitting more theaters this coming week. And box office wise, I think it's doing pretty decently. It's already made 3 million.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes, which the budget I'm not aware of, but I have a feeling it's not very high. So
Yeah, I don't think it's a high budget. It might have a high marketing budget though, considering
maybe,
that like it was fairly well advertised, especially for an A24 film. But I mean, I don't know what the actual budget of the film was, but I imagine it's probably going to make it back.
Mm-hmm.
So good for the film. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, like what films A24 is going to market for the Oscars this year. There's obviously, as usual, plenty of things for them to choose from. I wonder if they're going to include this. This is, at the moment, there's Under the Silver Lake, which I don't see as actually, making an Oscar, splash. Based on some of the reviews I've read for it.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
it's
think
hard.
Slice, yeah.
Well, I don't know. Definitely not Slice. I actually don't think I ever got around to talking about that on the show, but I did see Slice, and it's a bad film.
Okay. Well,
yes.
there's Hereditary, obviously, Eighth Grade,
Yeah.
which obviously is one of my, first Reformed. Those are probably the biggest, the ones that like we can most expect, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think eighth grade is probably going to be their big one, and they're probably going to do a sizable push for Hereditary and Mid90s. I think they're already doing
First
some
Reformed.
Stuff.
I think
Oh,
Ethan
First
Hawke
Reformed,
for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, I forgot that was A24. Yeah, no, I think definitely First Reformed is going to get a pretty big push. I would not be surprised if Ethan Hawke gets a Best Actor nomination, like the fifth chair, because it's now it's like lots like kind of up in the air right now, and I'm not quite sure how Bohemian Rhapsody is going to stand, just because the response to that film has been fairly negative, and I don't know if that's going to hurt the perception of Rami Malek's performance, but we'll see.
Based on everything I'm reading, I would be shocked if Rami Malek gets any sort of nomination, because I doubt they're going to push for it, knowing about this backlash to the film. But that's more than off topic.
I would think that they'll probably still do a push, but I don't know. I can't really talk about too much more until next week. But
yeah,
I think they're gonna probably at least push for his performance, because they could definitely push for him, I think.
It's that time of year, Will Ashton. We're kind of looking at what's going to be happening over the next, for Oscar season. I mean, Green Book is going to be coming out soon, and
oh boy,
that's going to be the sort of schmaltzy. First Man is probably going to get some pushes, and A Star Is Born. I mean, it's all happening as we speak, so it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Green Book is going to be apparently quite the contender. It's very weird for me, but yeah, because that's who made that? It's the Farrelly brother, Peter Farrelly, I believe, made that.
Was it Peter Farrelly? Really?
Yeah, you didn't know that?
I was not aware. No.
This is his follow up to movie 43.
I didn't know he made. Yeah, I didn't know he made movies on his own. He always makes.
Yeah,
them with Bobby.
actually, so they made Dumb and Dumber 2 together.
Yeah.
And then after that, they're like, we're gonna do our own things. And I don't know what Bobby Farley is, or Fairley, yeah. But I don't know what Bobby Fairley is up to, but Peter Farrelly made this film, and now it's an awards contender.
I mean, I want to see it. I love Mahershala Ali, and I love Viggo Mortensen. And it is a weird turn for Peter Farrelly. I mean, this is a guy, he did something about Mary, Shallow Hal, Heartbreak Kid. Did you see Hall Pass? That was such a weird movie.
I did see Hall Pass.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, the original Dumb and Dumber, Kingpin. So he has a couple good films under his name.
Sure. Let's move on to our mini reviews. That'll do it for Mid90s. Okay, so first up for mini reviews, I wanted to talk about The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which I kind of recommend this. I don't know if I recommend this to you, Ashton, knowing the things that you like. But for those of you who are listening...
Okay.
That's the thing. Riverdale. That's what this is connected to. It's in the Riverdale universe. They're being coy on whether or not they're actually going to connect these things. It's being produced by Greg Berlanti, who's, Warner Brothers Television. The Berlanti verse includes like Arrow, Riverdale, The Flash, like all of those CW shows. But this Sabrina show is on Netflix. Now, Will Ashton, I do want to ask you, Sabrina the Teenage Witch. What's your fortitude on that property? Comics, shows, anything?
Well, I didn't really read the comics, but I'm certainly familiar with the show. I mean, I remember watching that on syndication, like a lot of the reruns that were on, and so I'm fairly familiar with the property as far as the show is concerned. I mean, I like know all the like the main stuff about it. Like she's a witch, she's a teenager, she has a cat that talks, and she has like a mom that's like kind of always concerned, I guess.
Well, she has
so,
her aunts.
Sorry, her aunt. Yeah, that's right.
Zelda and Hilda.
But I remember liking the show, but I remember it was definitely kind of in the same vein as like Bewitched, I guess. Like it was kind of like that, like
campy kind of.
Yeah, like a campy sitcom, basically about witches, and like it was fun for what it was. But I could certainly see a reboot doing more with it, and it sounds like the approach to the show is very much in the opposite direction. Still, I mean, like campy, but like not the campy that was the show from the 90s.
I think that's right on. So. Yes, same as you. I watched the TGIF show when I was growing up. I love the character of Salem. Very different in this new show, I should say. I even watched like the animated series at one point, and I started reading a few years ago the Sabrina comics, which were redone to have a much darker feel, very similar to Riverdale. And in the darker take on Sabrina, it really is like a gritty reboot, but in the best way possible. Like it actually like hypes up the occult inspirations behind witches and behind witchcraft. It's like not your father's Harry Potter, basically. And I kind of love the show's forthcomingness with all of that, because this is very much related to those newer comics. It has very little connective tissue to the original Sabrina series, aside from like name and places and proximity of characters. That said, the other reason I was really looking forward to this is because you all know I love Archie comics, but also Kiernan Shipka, who plays the main character, Sabrina. So like, for those of you listening, Mad Men is one of my favorite shows of all time, if not my favorite show. Kiernan Shipka is one of the main reasons you see her grow up on that show, and she is truly a prodigy, in my opinion, in terms of acting. She really is. Like, you watch some of those seasons when she's only like 10 years old. She's only 18. Mad Men came out in 2007. This kid has a huge, amazing future ahead of her, and I love that she got her own series. This is a great, I think, stepping stone to even bigger and better things for her. Miranda Otto is in this show as well, which I was surprised to see. I didn't catch from the trailers that she was in this. Jazz Sinclair as well, Michelle Gomez, Chance Perdomo, Lucy Davis, Ross Lynch. Very great cast. And the premise of Chilling Adventures is that Sabrina, think like Wizards of Waverly Place, but with Satanism.
Fun.
Basically, Sabrina, she's half witch, she's half mortal. She's about to turn 16. And she has to decide whether or not she wants to stay a witch, which would mean she has to say goodbye to her mortal friends, her boyfriend Harvey, her best friends at school. Or if she decides to be a witch, she would go to the Academy of Unseen Arts. But part of that means that she has to sign the Book of the Beast and surrender her soul to Lucifer, the Dark Lord, Satan, all of those names. And yeah, this show is very satanic. Say again?
I was gonna say, well, it's like that metaphor thing that they always do, like half, like kind of in that stage of growing up, right? Because she's like 18, and it's like, does she kind of become this one thing that she's expected to be, or become her own person, or something like that? Right.
Coming of age, very representative of like her parents. Her parents passed away, but her dad is like the witch side, her mother is the mortal side, and she's trying to figure out like how she can try to be both. And she has to, like, this show, like, it heats up. It's very much from the beginning. She has to make this decision now. Like, it's not, she has a whole season to decide what she wants to do, and she's doing, it's not like, monster of the week episodes. It's very much a running thread. It's very much a Netflix binge show where it's one story told over about, I think it's 10 episodes. I'm 4 episodes in, and I'm really liking this. It is a bit jarring because it's very strange to see Satanism with just the courage of saying this is a Satanist show. And it's a show where the characters treat Satanism like any other religion. And so that means that they criticize it. And I should say too, it's not like conventional Satanism, right? It's like, obviously one that's like layered in this stuff exists and that there like magic is real and all of that. I don't know if I'm dashing any of your hopes and other religions, Will Ashton. But yeah, no, I don't know what a good comparison is. It's not like there's like a show out there where, maybe Seventh Heaven comes closest, where like actual miracles happen on the show or something, where it's like very Christian and like things happen that you're like, oh wow, I guess it's, this is very much like it has its own system, it has its own rules, and it just sort of uses Satanism as context. It reminds me, and they even reference this much closer to the way that Neil Gaiman writes different shows like Lucifer, very similar to that kind of feel, very similar to his novel American Gods and the show, where it's got the name of characters you recognize, but the system and the rules and all of the content is spun to be its own thing. And so I think that is really going to turn a lot of people off who are very uncomfortable with the occult, with a lot of this stuff, especially because, especially in America, like it's something that has, no pun intended, been demonized forever because of its connections to, violence and, the occult and Charles Manson and all that extra stuff. And so that's definitely something that I wonder, like, how people are going to respond to it. Obviously, this is a show that is on the radar of people who think that it's, it's definitely not a show that could ever possibly remotely be on the CW. It's very spooky. It's got some it's got some thematic content that is definitely not network TV friendly, and I appreciate it for that. And I think it's, it's definitely more of a horror thing. It has more in common with horror movies that embrace more readily the occult and themes like that. So the supernatural, as it were. And I recommend it with sort of a pause, because I do think that's something that a lot of people have issue with, and it definitely opens up conversations that a lot of people probably don't even want to have. So that's part of it. And just from the nitty gritty of it, it's an interesting show. It's not amazing. I think Kieran Shipka, obviously, she has the charm and charisma to carry anything, but I do think some of the writing of the early episodes, and I'm hoping it improves later on, it does get a little slow. Especially the third episode, I was really getting frustrated because it becomes like a courtroom drama, and it starts to be a little bit like, okay, this isn't fun to watch. This isn't exciting, and the humor isn't quite there. So far, it's a bit hit or miss in some of the writing, but I do think that it's working its way towards something bigger and better. So I think the potential is all still there. So, because it's a Netflix show and because the episodes aren't too long, you don't have to, commit a ton of time to it. I think it's worth watching if you're interested in this kind of new take on the series, and people might really enjoy it.
Yeah, it sounds like, if you're giving me the right impression, it sounds like either The Witch and or The Love Witch told from the people who made Riverdale. Is that? I mean,
it's so different from Riverdale.
Have you seen The Love Witch? Okay, it's a really good film.
I would say that it's closer to The Witch, honestly. Okay. It's like if you took,
that's what it sounds like. Yeah.
If you took the scene from the very end of The Witch, and then what happens next, that's kind of what this is, honestly.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was alluding to.
Which kind of is a good thing, a little bit, and obviously, like, the references to, they have like the same references, the same like lore, like Black Phillip and like all the goat stuff. It's all in here. So yeah, mileage may vary, but it might be worth checking out for some people.
Okay, cool.
All right, that's The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. It's now streaming on Netflix. Next up, Johnny English Strikes Again. Well, actually, I saw this movie, the first of this movie, it feels like over a decade ago, probably. And I remember thinking it was funny and that I never wanted to see it again. But unfortunately, Johnny English struck again anyway. Does he strike out?
Yeah, so it's weird. Like, you're saying that, like, Johnny English, the first film, kind of came out closer to this time period of mid-90s than now. And it's just kind of weird that, like I think it came out in 2002?
Oh, wow.
2001, maybe?
That was
it was a while ago. Maybe 2003 at the latest.
I was thinking definitely 2004, but okay.
No, it's early 2000s, and I thought it was pretty funny. I mean, I was a kid, and I was like, it's all right. And then I saw the second movie, I believe
2003, so kind of close. Yeah,
and then the sequel came out in 2011, I believe.
There was a second one.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe that's the one that I'm thinking of.
Well, there was Johnny English, and then there was Johnny English Returns. comes
Oh,
back.
Johnny English Reborn. I
Is it
never saw
Reborn?
that.
Yeah, it's a very forgettable film. That's the main thing to say about it, and it just kind of came and went, and at least here in the United States, and I think everyone, like as far as here in the U.S., just kind of forgot about Johnny English. But I guess the big thing in the U.K. because they made a third film, and then they like spent a fairly sizable amount of money in it. And I mean, Emma Thompson's in this thing, for goodness sakes, and it just I don't know. It feels very surreal to me because it's just like, who's asking for this film? Like, I mean, it's not terrible. It's fine, I guess, but it just doesn't really do anything or have much to say or provide that many laughs. It's just like, yeah, okay.
Is it just you think it's like comfort food for fans of the franchise?
Well, I don't even know if I'd go that far. It just feels like a retread, really, of just I would think if you're gonna do like a John English film in 2018, you would either want to like poke fun at the Daniel Craig films, like like kind of the gritty, like
Update it,
very
yeah.
dour films of like the Bond series, or you like kind of poke fun at like the like how it's very masculine and like kind of like there's a lot of like tropes in the franchise now. It really doesn't do either. It just kind of makes just another John English movie with Rowan Atkinson, like I guess closer to 60 now. So he can't really do like any like of his physical comedy stuff, which makes it less appealing as far as the comedy is concerned. And yeah, it's like I sound like I'm just kind of like talking my thoughts through because I really just don't have much to say about it.
It's funny though because you mentioned how it probably should have parodied the Daniel Craig films. It even has Olga Kurylenko in it, who was in Quantum of Solace, probably the worst Daniel Craig Bond film by most people's estimation. So
yeah, I mean,
what?
Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't like. I mean, if that was the intention, then it didn't really like do anything with that because like it.
I think they just
really,
forgot.
I don't know. I mean, like it just feels like a serviceable sequel. And I mean, if you're a fan of the other two Johnny English films, I guess you'll get something out of it. But really, I mean, it reminded me of one of Maverick's favorite quotes on the show, which is the "What's going on? What are we doing here?" And that's like just felt like as I was watching the film and after I left, I was just like, what are we doing here? Like, why did I just see John English 3?
If a film gets you existential, yeah.
I mean, so I gave it a C minus, I think, or well, actually, I think I gave it a C. I saw it like 3 weeks ago, and I really haven't thought much about it until you brought it up. So
it hit the UK and France a bit earlier. So
yeah, which is why I guess I got to see it so early. But yeah, I don't really have much to say about it. I'm always happy to see Rowan Atkinson get work. I just kind of wish he was given more to do besides a fairly mundane sequel to a property that most people have probably forgotten about by now. But I mean, I understand they can't really do another Bean film because that's probably too intensive for someone of his age. So I guess this is the best thing he can do with his time. I don't know. Well, give him like a Netflix show or something. I don't know.
That'd be interesting. Well, I think I have an answer to the question of, who wanted this. The film is
a lot of British people.
Yes, the film has grossed $109 million at the box office. So yeah, clearly there is an audience. Believe it or not,
the hype system. I guess it didn't translate over here.
Right. Well, yeah, it's the reviews have not been favorable. But I think it's the comfort food thing. It's just like he's a familiar character, and the people in the UK just really love James Bond parodies, I guess, and it's good enough for them. I don't know. I was reading also some of the cast descriptions here, and Olga Kurylenko plays a Russian spy who is investigating a Silicon Valley tech billionaire, which to me is a plot line from like 2011.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, why is that everything lately? It's always like, every bad guy this year, like I'm thinking of like Venom, is some sort of Silicon Valley. Like, is Hollywood trying to tell us something that like the people don't want to like Silicon Valley right now? Because I think that's probably more poignant than I'm giving credit.
Well, I guess new tech is scary. So
you said it.
Yeah.
Man, that's a last call topic if I ever heard it. Anyway, yeah. People, I think critics are probably a little harsher on this film even than you are, Will Ashton. It's got a 32% on Rotten Tomatoes, average rating of 4.7 out of 10. So yeah, about C minus. And yeah, doesn't look like it's worth going to the theater to check out unless you're a huge fan of this franchise. And even then,
Yeah, I mean, even if you are a fan, I think it's a Redbox rental at best.
yeah,
I don't think there's really going to be much here for anyone.
that's sad to hear. All right, last up for me is Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm kind of carrying on the theme of talking about video games because, this is the time of year when video games, like the big budget, A-list video games are coming out. So I feel like it's a big culture moment right now, what's happening with Red Dead Redemption 2. Did you ever, oh no, why am I asking the last thing? If you've ever played Red Dead Redemption or Red Dead Revolver, then neither game is Mario Party. So Red Dead Redemption 2 is a new Rockstar game. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Rockstar, they of course are behind the blockbuster Grand Theft Auto franchise. Their last high-profile release was Grand Theft Auto 5, which was about 5 years ago. And so Red Dead Redemption is a sequel to one of their most critically acclaimed games of all time, and one of my favorite games ever, Red Dead Redemption, which came out, I think, 2010. And that is a truly terrific Western. And it's one of those, I think it was one of the first games that Rockstar came out. I'd say Grand Theft Auto 4, which was 2008, was the first time one of their games had just a really great story. The narrative, the writing, it was just on its own. It was just terrific. And I think Red Dead Redemption topped it as just being like, man, this is just a great story. This could make a movie. In Red Dead Redemption 2 kind of carries that on, where I even saw someone complaining, it was like, why doesn't Rockstar just make a movie already instead of these games? And there's some controversy in this game. It's, as I mentioned, it's an open world Western. You're playing in 1899, you're part of this gang, and you're this kind of a bounty hunter outlaw character, and you really are given a ton of freedom, but obviously there is a larger narrative behind this character trying to help his gang survive in kind of a reimagined version of Texas and some of those other border states. And yeah, it is interesting because if it's a movie, it's like a 20-hour movie, right? It's obviously a long narrative, it's more episodic. And I'm loving this game, but there's been some backlash, as I mentioned, because they were really pushing hard. I think there was a report came out very recently where the game designers, the writer, like people working on this game were working, I think, 100-hour weeks.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, and it's just like grueling, terrible labor practices. And so there was a lot of people being like, I don't know about this. And then the game comes out and the reviews have all been like hugely positive. Game Informer, which has always been my favorite review outlet. You can probably think of them as like the New York Times, I guess, of gaming. They gave it a 10, very rare, 10 out of 10. And so I think the last time they gave a 10 to a Rockstar game was Grand Theft Auto 4. So that said, there's been a lot of backlash to this game. It requires a ton of absurd patience. It's one of those things where like your character moves slowly, and sometimes the dialogue can be a little slow, and you can't really skip a lot of things. And I just want to talk about it maybe from more of a cinematic perspective. It's an interactive movie almost, where like in between episodes you can just sort of roam the world of the game, and it got me thinking a lot about how this can be the future almost of like I think video games and movies are getting closer and closer to overlapping. And I think that they are, the attention to realism is, which some people are criticizing Red Dead Redemption 2 over. I mean, the realism in this game, Will Ashton, like your facial hair grows over time and you have to shave it. If your character doesn't eat enough, you lose weight, and like it affects your stamina, it affects how long you can run and your health. And if you eat too much, the opposite happens.
Yeah, but do you get dysentery?
Characters do get sick, and
so it's a real Oregon Trail, I guess.
There you go. Thank you for. I was gonna say, yeah, it definitely if we're going back to 90s references, that's obviously astute. So I think that this idea of like exploring the world of fiction that you're engaging with is the future. I think that one day, like, you're not just going to watch the movie Baby Driver. You're going to play the game while you watch it, where you are doing the driving, and it's sort of a guided experience. And I think that it's an exciting thing that can happen. Obviously, it takes a lot of manpower. I don't know what the gender neutral term for that should be, but human power, I guess. And it takes a lot of like we're seeing like the intensive hours being put into these people to grind out these games. It's what kind of brought down Telltale. In some ways, they made a lot of financial mistakes, and they also didn't treat their employees very well. And we're seeing a kind of a pivot point in the gaming industry. And I bring it up because, Cinemaholics, we triumph story over all else. And I think that this is a game that's worth paying very close attention to because of that. And I think that if people say that, the Westerns, like nobody cares about Westerns and those stories anymore, I think that's a bit oversaid. Obviously some great Western films have come out in the last decade. This was the decade that was kicked off with True Grit, the remake. So I think that Red Dead Redemption 2 is on its own is a narrative that's worth seeking out. If you've never played a game in your life, I think you can figure it out, and I think you can get something kind of profound out of it. It obviously is a time sink. It's definitely taking a lot of hours out of my vacation. I'm about to go back to the normal grind, and so I'm going to be kind of pulling back the throttle on this game a bit. But I've devoted at least 10-15 hours on this game already, and it came out on Thursday, so that tells you a little bit of something. So that's Red Dead Redemption 2. I have a feeling, Will Ashton, you're going to be playing it right after we record this podcast.
Oh no, but I'm glad it's a good game. I mean, I've been hearing a lot about it, which usually means it's pretty popular. And it sounds like it's a real Westworld.
Yes, the Westworld comparison is also good. And, I think that's maybe even going even farther into the future, where it's like not only are you playing the video game, you're playing the movie as a video game, you're eventually just going to be in it. That's probably what's going to happen within the century. So
I'll go get my Spurs.
Very nice. All right, Will Ashton, close us out. What is your surprise review for us?
I guess this is a surprise. It's I just wanted to talk about my thoughts on Kidding Season 1, which is the new Showtime series with Jim Carrey. I believe, he's been doing a couple things of late, but mostly supporting roles. Jim Carrey, he did, what was it called? The Bad Batch. He did Dark Crimes, I believe it was called, which didn't really do too well. There's something else, I believe.
Well, wasn't there the Man on the Moon documentary? What was that called?
Oh, yeah, Jim and Andy. Yeah, which, that was one of my favorite movies of last year. I think Maverick as well. And I think he's also in Kick-Ass 2 for a little bit. And then he did Dumb and Dumber 2, which we also talked about earlier in the episode. And so it seems like he's been kind of laying low. He's been doing a lot of painting and stuff. And that's, I think, more for personal reasons. He suffered a really tragic loss of his girlfriend a couple years ago, and he has not been handling it too well. And I do think the show, to some extent, is therapy for him. It's him reuniting with Michel Gondry, who directed Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This show, it's more in the vein of your typical kind of darkly satiric Showtime show, like maybe what was that thing with Steve Coogan a couple years ago
on Showtime?
Happy-ish.
Oh.
Or like Weeds or something like that, where it's just kind of like poking fun at the suburbs and like kind of middle-age crises and whatnot.
Well, I can see that because Jason Bateman was an exec producer, right?
Yeah, he's involved with the show, and the show itself is it's basically in the vein of Mr. Rogers for adults. Jim Carrey plays a character called Jeff Pickles, who is like a child entertainer, like Mr. Rogers, who kind of teaches kids these lessons on like a PBS type show. And unlike Mr. Rogers, it's more of like a corporation type of thing. Like his budget's a little bigger, and like he has a producer played by Frank Langella, or what's how you pronounce his last name? The guy from Frosting.
Frank Langella.
Frank Langella, there you go. He's actually very good on the show, and he's like very much about like the money and the corporation. And as we follow Jeff in the show, he's basically having he's like on the verge of a mental breakdown. Like his son, one of his twin sons, passed away about a year or two ago, and he is no longer with his wife, played by Judy Greer, and his connection to his other living son is fleeting. And he's trying to process that grief through his show, but Franklin, how you pronounce the last name?
Frank Langella.
Frank Langella, there.
Legendary actor.
Yeah, I love Frank Langella, but I couldn't remember his last name. So he's very much like, do not talk about grief and stuff. That's going to be like a downer. We're trying to sell products and stuff. And that frustration, being unable to express himself creatively, has kind of mutated and caused him to kind of fall out of control emotionally. And I was really excited about the show. I mean, I was very curious to see what would be the return of Michel Gondry and Jim Carrey, and what they would do together after their first film, which I consider a brilliant piece of work. And I ultimately have seen about 3 episodes of the show, and I believe there are 8 available as of now. And I'm starting to like the show a little more as it goes along, but I do think it's not quite there. And I think what it is that I just don't really think the show really captures what Mr. Rogers was like. I mean, I think especially coming after Joe Pera Talks with You, which I think was ultimately the successor of Mr. Rogers. I think that show is very good about having the ideas of what Mr. Rogers was doing with his show, but like kind of allowing it to be accessible to like depressed middle-aged, or not even middle-aged, just depressed like white males, I guess. Like that's kind of what this show is going for. And it's definitely doing it a little more edgier. It's just it's trying a lot harder, I think, and I just don't think the comedy quite works, and I just don't think the show really is clear about what it wants to do. But I do think Jim Carrey's performance is quite good. I mean, I do think he is definitely getting a lot out. I do think, unlike Jeff Pickles, he is allowing himself to express creatively the grief he is feeling, and I think that it can be at least therapeutic for him, and I hope the rest of the show is able to improve upon that. But as it stands, I'm kind of in the middle about it. I think I'm going to sit with a C+ for what I've seen as of now, but I am curious to watch the rest of it, just because I do think there is something here. I do think there is potential in this show to be something really interesting and potentially cathartic, but as it stands, I still think it's kind of meandering and not quite figuring itself out yet, but I'm hopeful. I'm hoping it's definitely better than Happy-ish, so I'm holding out hope, maybe in vain, but we'll see.
Yeah, I've been wanting to see this, but I've been waiting because I want to wait until all the episodes are available, and I think we're still a couple of weeks away from that.
Yeah, I think it's 10 episodes, and we're on episode 8.
And they're all like half hour, basically, right?
Yeah.
I don't see this getting a second season because the ratings have dipped dramatically.
Really?
Yeah, it's like cut in half from the first episode, and just it's really diminishing like crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe like I think this may have been better if it was like a Netflix show or something on streaming.
Yeah, because, I was gonna say it's not readily available. Not a lot of people have Showtime, so yeah.
Yeah, well, not only that, but I just don't think the first episode is a really good indicator of what the show is. I think it is a show that kind of you need to like let it like fester and digest a little bit, and I think the first episode can be a little jarring, and like it often makes me think about like what if like BoJack was like on like a network TV station where it was like one episode a week. Like, I don't think it would last. Like, I don't think the show would stand on its first episode. And that's not to say that this show is going to be the next BoJack. I don't think it ultimately is. But I just think the first episode is not the best indicator of what it is. And I think the Showtime put too much of their creative interest or commercial interest in the first episode, and that was a poor decision. So, I don't know. We'll see if it gets second season. I'm like you. I'm not 100% sure it will. I think it'll probably get canceled. But I'm curious to see if it gets a second season or not.
All right, well, that's Kidding Season 1, now streaming on Showtime. As Will mentioned, I think the 8th episode is coming out today. So, yeah, you'll be able to see 8 out of 10 of the episodes on Showtime if you so desire. With that, let's close out the show with movies coming out next week. We have a lot of choices between Bohemian Rhapsody, which almost certainly is going to be our featured review. I think that is the film that most of our listeners we'll probably be expecting. We'll be doing a patron poll to sort of decide, okay, do you want us to do a double feature? Because we also have The Nutcracker and the Four Realms, which is a new Disney live-action fantasy. Very much like if you watch the trailers, it reminds you of like Alice in Wonderland and that sort of thing. We're not sure if we're going to talk about that in mini reviews or if the listeners decide we'll also do a double feature and devote equal time to Bohemian Rhapsody and The Nutcracker. Are you excited about Nutcracker, though? Well, I know you've already seen Bohemian Rhapsody. I missed my Bohemian Rhapsody screening, so I don't have an opinion, and you don't want to share it yet. So,
yeah, well, I do think the Bohemian Rhapsody is going to be a better conversation because I think it's going to get pretty feisty.
Yeah,
but I don't really have much of an opinion on the Nutcracker film. I haven't really even seen an ad for it.
I've seen the trailers, yeah. That's and some TV spots.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything. Like I just seen the poster. And
they're pushing it hard, I think, on like Hulu. It's really showing up on there, and like every time I've gone to see a movie, it's always on like the first look, Newbie, that kind of thing, and like Disney obviously wants us to do well, but I think they're really banking on Ralph Breaks the Internet being their big, holiday film. Yeah,
I mean, is this a Disney film?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I'm curious if this is going to be their other flop. I mean, it underperformed. I don't know if it was technically a flop, but this definitely feels like this is our flop of the year. For me, but I'm gonna remain hopeful and see what happens.
We'll see. Yeah, Disney doesn't usually flop relative to budget, but this does look like a high budget.
I don't know. I mean, they have like one film a year where they just they belly flop. And it's
but it isn't. Well, it isn't like gonna be like John Carter, Lone Ranger, right? Because this feels more of
Tomorrowland.
But this feels more of like it's based on like an existing property, even though Nutcracker, I guess, doesn't have its own like animated film, so it's not really like a live action remake or anything. It's sort of like a classic tale, so maybe it is a little bit more like John Carter and stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a recognizable name, but I just don't really, we'll certainly see, but I just don't really know if like kids are jonesing to see a Nutcracker film. I think it's but it's
like when
holidays,
like when you think about the Nutcracker, you think like going downtown to like see the play, I guess. Like I never had that experience, but I have to imagine that's what people think. Like I don't think they want to go to the movies to see that.
Well, that's where the Alice in Wonderland comparisons come in, because it's kind of being billed as like The Wrinkle in Time, and like this young girl and becomes a hero, and it's
maybe that's her flop this year. Actually, technically,
was that technically a flop? I haven't checked the box office in a while.
Man, Disney's underperforming this year.
Oh gosh, that's rare. They're definitely not underperforming with Marvel movies.
That's true.
And Incredibles 2 being like the highest grossing animated film of all time. I think at this point, it might have surpassed Frozen. Anyway, those are the options. There's also we should mention Suspiria hits wider release, and we'll probably wait. We'll probably do our own thing for Suspiria, though.
I was gonna say, is that gonna be on the pool as well?
I think we're going to leave it out for now, because I think that I think with Suspiria it makes sense to sort of give it its own last call, because I feel like you have to talk about spoilers of that film based on what I've heard. You might be a little bit more aware.
You can do both. It would probably be more beneficial to do spoilers, but
that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're thinking out loud. There's also Nobody's Fool, the new Tiffany Haddish film.
You can't leave that one off.
Sorry, yes, of course. And it's coming out next week, so we'll put out the poll to see if we're going to talk about it. And
Tyler Perry's first studio film.
Oh, no kidding. So
it's Paramount. Yeah, it's his first studio film.
It's probably going to make a ton of cash. So
maybe, I don't know. It's his third R-rated film.
Is it really rated R? Wow.
Yeah, it's rated R. There's a Red Band trailer, and it's like the tamest Red Band trailer I have ever seen.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've only seen the Green Band.
It's really, really tame.
Oh, maybe I have seen the Red Band trailer. I just didn't even catch. Yeah. Okay. Well, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you as always for listening. I think next week we need to talk about Filmstruck, by the way. I put it off because still mourning the loss of that streaming service. But for now, we're out of time. Thank you as always for listening. If you love our show, please leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you love your podcasts. And hang out with us on our social pages. Our Facebook and Twitter is linked in the show notes below, along with our YouTube channel and everywhere else you can go to find our stuff. And you can email us anytime, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. And you can become a patron and vote in our weekly content polls by following the link again in the show notes. And you can see how you can become a supporter of this podcast. All right, that'll do it for us this week. From the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
And from the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Wash.
For Maverick Hines of the Broadband Basement, we will see you next time.